Life After the Fight is a show that speaks to everyday issues pertaining to our mind, body, and soul. We will address topics ranging from mental health, self care, fatherhood, family, relationships, and more. Our goal is to encourage listeners to keep fighting through the obstacles, challenges, and struggles. The focal point is simple: seek a fresh perspective, become teachable, and improve your overall health and wellness. If you're craving more growth and development, this podcast is for you.
All right, Ricky, welcome back. I'm glad we have a nice one to talk about tonight. But as always, I wanted to start out with: is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience that's happened to you in the last couple of days, couple of weeks,
Yes.
since the last time we were together? So anything?
I mean, I always like talking about my sons.
Okay, good.
And so my youngest, who just entered high school about a month ago, he's now part of the wrestling team.
Wow.
So we went from track to the wrestling team. So just briefly, I was like, dude, like how did you even come up with wrestling? And so he said, he says I kept walking past the gym, and I kept on looking at, how they were practicing. And I was like, wow, that looks interesting.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, I said, well, you're definitely strong. You're definitely strong. You definitely are, really good with your hands. He says, I said, so I just want to know what possessed you to even consider it, right? And so he was like, well, at least I can toss people around and not get in trouble for it.
Well, at least he gave you an honest answer.
I said, well, at least you're honest for that one. So I said, okay. So yeah, so he's definitely started that. So I'm looking forward to seeing. He said, I just want to try it. I just want to just see how it is. And I said, that's perfect.
That's perfect.
Go for it.
Tell him to try everything he wants to, whatever that school has to offer.
Exactly.
Tell him, say, look, you know what? If you think you're bad enough or big enough to do this, try that too.
Yes.
Don't ever walk away from a situation with any regrets.
There you go.
And say, hey,
That's
I
it.
wasn't able to do that. So,
That's it.
wow. Okay. I don't have anything new to discuss except for this topic tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's get it.
I'm going to go into it, but first I'm going to preface it with the fact that this comes from listening to other people's conversations, 2 coaching sessions that I had recently, and excuse me, quite honestly, something that we never shed light on. We talk about manifestation, destination, belief, and so putting those things together, uh, and through a little bit of meditation that I've done, this wasn't even the original topic I was gonna, present, but I feel like our audience really needs to hear what we have to say on this. And that is tonight's topic is physical birth, life, and death, the trifecta. Now, we always talk about where you were born, the state you're in. And I mean the state meaning whether you were born to a rich family, poor family, or what have you. And we talk about all the things we want to do with the successes of our lives. But when it comes to death, it's a taboo subject. And what came to me is the whole entirety of life is the 3-legged stool: birth, life, death.
Mm-hmm.
But we tend to only stick with the birth and the life aspect, and we shun the death as if it doesn't exist, like it's the elephant in the room. Now, physically, we all gonna die.
Oh yeah, that's guaranteed. Yeah.
But with a lot of people I've talked to, they spend so much time doing things to prevent death that they don't actually know how to live because of a fear of something that, quite honestly, none of us understand.
Yes. Yes.
Because we don't know what's on the other side of our demise, we tend to just focus on the birth and the life.
Mm-hmm.
But I want our audience to know that all of it is all encompassed, not encumbering, but all encompassed of itself. If you're born, at some point you're going to die. And you should live your life in a way, in my opinion, full throttle with not saying disregard for death, but live full on so that when death comes, it's not a big fearful situation where you're like, man, I don't want to go. You go kicking and screaming. I'm sure you guys have heard that, kicking and screaming, but that you go easily knowing that, hey, that's a part of life. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be born. Because my belief, and this is where I want to preface this for our audience, Ricky, is that I believe that I'm a spiritual being manifested in a physical world. So I know that I have a limited time here. I don't care if it's 100 years, it's still limited. You know, we all say when someone's life is cut short in our opinions, we go, oh, wow, you know, that person didn't get to fulfill their whole lives. Well, they did because they were here for that time. And I was asking a client and said, well, what do you think about a person who lives only to 45 and a person who lives to 90? And they said, huh, I never really thought about that. I said, well, they both have the same ideals, goals, and dreams. They all were hoping to wake up the next morning. The 45-year-old had plans, the 90-year-old had plans. But we go, and this client said, yeah, but the 90-year-old was probably knowing that, you know, they just accepted that at some point they're going to go. I go, yes and no, because I've talked to some 85 and 87-year-old people who still gave me their 5-year plan.
Yeah.
They weren't planning on going anywhere. They were still up an extra 1 or 2 years too, just like the young person.
Yes.
So don't make the assumption that because they're much older that they've accepted a, well, I want to go. Because here's the thing, people who have been here longer are more familiar with life and living. That's why you see younger people take bigger risks and chances because, quite honestly, they don't see life as coming to an end at any point.
Exactly.
So that's why I wanted to bring that up tonight so that people understand that even when people leave our lives, they leave our physical presence, but the spiritual, in my opinion, goes on. Now, whether we're going to catch up with that spiritual part of them at some point or another, I can't say. But I thought about that because I had a client about a year and a half ago, and she had been through her therapist, through her PPO, GMO, whatever it is, and she said, I was referred to you by my friend because she thought you could help me. I've been in therapy better parts of 3.5 months because I lost my father. And she went on to tell me this whole story about her loss. And all I could do was sit there and listen and listen and listen. And inside, I'm praying, like, oh, God, give me something to say. Because I'm not sure what I could say to satiate this woman's heart and mind. And at the end of it, I said these words, sir. I looked at her and I said, you know, thank you for sharing with me, first of all. I said, and you said your father's gone. He was your whole world. She goes, yeah. I said, I have a question I want you don't have to answer for me, but ask yourself. Would you exchange the hurt for having never known the man having the experience? She looked at me. She grabbed her purse. She says, thanks for listening. And she left. I thought I had offended her. 3 weeks go by, 4 weeks go by.
Wow.
I was afraid to call the friend who referred because I was like, I said something wrong. Finally, I get a call from that friend who referred this woman and said, the woman would like to speak to you. Is that okay if she call you? I said, sure, have her call me. She calls me and she says, uh, she called me Mr. Jones. And I said, no, call me George. She goes, I want to first of all say, thank you for listening. I wasn't upset. She goes, but I was more confused. She goes, I went for almost 11 weeks to talk to this therapist who gave me all types of methods and training so that I could get through my grief. And she never once asked me the question you did. And I want to answer it for you. She goes, I will carry this pain for the rest of my life because nothing, and she says, and I mean this, nothing would have ever made me or want me to desire to exchange not having this pain for not having the experience of my father. And I said, great. So that made me think about her in regards to this topic tonight is death is going to come. Accept it the same way you accept life. Don't make it the ugly stepchild or cousin that we're all like, man, you go to church and you've been to church, Ricky. And the one question, I'm a for full disclosure for those listening, I'm a PK, a former pastor's kid. And the one thing I noticed as a kid growing up is that everybody wanted to go to heaven, but nobody wanted to die. So I always thought that was a very contradictory thing. Like, man, we love the Lord, we love the Lord. I said, so you ready to die? I said, no. I like living. Okay.
Wow.
Well, how you gonna marry the two at some point? Because some point you gonna leave.
Yeah.
So that's that. I'm sorry. There is a question in there, but also I wanted to expand on where I was going with my thoughts on this. So you tell me. Do you think it's appropriate for us to discuss, life and death, the full realm or spectrum of our experience in the physical realm?
Yeah, I think it's important because I see, I don't know if you see the same thing, but I see more people impacted by death than they're impacted by life.
And I can see that.
And the reason why I say that is because, yes, when a new life is brought into this world, there's happiness, there's celebration, there's the popping of the cork and the you know, but when someone leaves, it's a much deeper response and it impacts people more because life that once was is now lost. It's gone. And so many people struggle with it because of their own inadequacies, their own struggles, their own challenges, versus the people, excuse me, versus the people who've actually put the death in perspective. And let me kind of explain that.
Okay.
I believe that there's certain people that are just straight selfish, and they don't want anything to be taken away from them.
Okay, I'm on that page. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, that's just.
Page.
I don't want nothing being taken away from me. Yeah. And when it comes to people, that's in the same category. Like I've heard people say, "God, why did you take my father away from me? Why did you take my mother? Why did you take God? Why did why you knew that was the only person?" And I'm like saying to myself, I understand you're in pain. I understand there's grief involved, right? But you're asking God, the creator of us, to give you an answer as to why he did something specifically to you as if it was personal, right? But that's the pain. We get that. But I just simply believe that the average person who struggles so much with death, I think it's because they don't really know how to die. I think people miss the understanding that there's birth, there's life, and there's death, and people celebrate everything. And when it comes to death, they grieve more than they celebrate because a lot of people are not really taught how to die. We have been taught how to live, but then the question becomes, how can you be taught how to live and not to die? Because life is a part of death. Everyone who has life is going to die. It's a question of when. Now, there are some people's, and I believe this, there are some people's deaths that come prematurely based on just their own lifestyle, their own bad choices. We know that. Let's just say God had you leaving in chapter 16, but you leave in chapter 6 because of what you've done.
Right.
So I believe in that, but I also believe that people struggle with knowing how to die because they struggle with knowing how to live. A lot of people are not really savvy enough to understand how this life, what it really requires of them, what it really means, and how it's not necessarily about the individual, but it's about individuals. I don't believe that we were born for ourselves. I believe that we were born for others.
Okay.
We are here to benefit, to share, to engage, to learn, and to help contribute to society. We are created to be, I believe, vessels. And so when you look at life, it's the question becomes, who are you living for and what are you living for? And that will determine how you die. Because you have a lot of people who die gracefully, and you have a lot of people that kick and scream leaving here. And then you got a lot of people who die and leave a whole lot of people mad. Whether it's family, whether it's friends, they arguing over the will, they arguing over property, they're arguing over kids, money. So if you look at how a person's life is lived, it will determine, it's this actually determined on the people that they left behind.
So what you just said made me think a death could also be a study in life and how people
Yeah.
respond towards one another
Yes.
because of that particular event. I like your aspect of that we are born for service of one another. And for many years, that's the same thing that I ascribe to. And then one day I started thinking outside of what I consider my norm or my programming or what I know. And I actually answered this question in this regard for a client because the person had said, well, I heard this statement that Muhammad Ali made years ago that service is the rent you pay for living. And I said, that sounds really good. I said, that sounds like a great snippet. It sounds like a great soundbite. I said, but I believe that both can live in the same realm. And she says, what do you mean by that? I said, I can agree with you that service is the rent you pay for living, but I could also uh, see the other side of that coin that the person who comes to life and lives solely for themselves, because I look at as our creator, and I believe God created all of us, that He's looking to see what each individual is doing with what they were given. Some will be of service, and others will not be of service.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
And
That's
so
definite.
I look at the death part as it should be a reflection of life. And people say, why should death be a reflection of life? If you live backwards and said, this is how I want to be remembered, if you want to be remembered at all, then you can start by a little exercise that I heard years ago that someone said, write down your own eulogy and then live according to it. And I thought, wow, that's actually a pretty good idea, living from the end forward. And people go, well, what do you mean by that? Is putting out the blueprint of your life for yourself so that you're not starting from the beginning and trying to figure out how you end up.
Mm.
But the flip side of that could be just the opposite too. If you plan it too much, then where's the enjoyment? The one that they enjoy of living, and you have no curiosity, no imagination. So I just say give proper respect to all three of the aspects of life, whether it's birth, your life, and your death, and understand that all three are equal in the physical world.
Yeah.
So
you can't have one without the other.
Don't neglect the fact that because for every beginning date there is an expiration.
There's an expiration date.
So understand that that is coming. We just don't know when. So make the middle portion of life so exhilarating, extreme, lavish, whatever you want to call it, so that when you get to the death part, it's just as celebrated as the beginning when you were born.
That's it.
And one of the reasons that most people mourn the death part, including the demise or whatever you want to call it, is because the first two were not fulfilled enough for the last part to be celebrated.
Yeah.
So live your life in that realm that whatever it is you think, and that's why I want to go back to what you said about your son. He said, "Hey, I'm trying wrestling." For those of you who are listening out there, try everything that you think your imagination affords or allows you to. And the reason I say this is that by the time you get to the death part, and of course, when you do get to that place, you won't know it, in my opinion, anyway.
You won't know it anyway.
So live your life in such a way that you're truly getting everything out of it that you want. That you're not waiting and wasting it. As a matter of fact, what I tell my sons is treat your time the same way you treat your money or your currency. You wouldn't just spend your money frivolously on any and everything and you wouldn't lose it, right?
There you go.
So when I hear people say, well, I'm just killing time, I go, wow. So you're wasting dollars. They go, what? I go, well, for all the time that you're letting go by, that's productive time you can be using to gain the things you want. And they don't necessarily have to be money, but at least utilize that time in a way that you're getting a benefit from it. So by the time you get through your birth and through your life, and when you get to death, you have spent all of your physical living currency.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I just want to say this to people who struggle with grief still. There's really no timetable that you should be done with grief. Some people carry grief for the rest of their lives.
I agree.
But I will say that, and I've said this to several people who have lost loved ones in the last 3 or 4 years, especially spouses. And what I've said to them was, how would you, how do you think your late spouse would want you to live now? Would he want you to feel down and out where you just don't want to do anything, or would he want you to live and enjoy life? What kind of person was he? If he was to speak to you right now and say to you, "What is wrong with you? Why aren't you enjoying life? I want you to be happy." Would you argue with him? And so,
I gotta say, Ricky, and this is where I'm gonna bring the levity to this conversation because I don't want to get too down on it. But years ago, I remember I sold life insurance, and my mentor said to me something that's I think appropriate for this. He goes, "Never talk to the wife separately or the husband separately. Make sure you get them together because then you guarantee the sale." He says, because if you talk to the wife separately, you talk to the husband separately, that's what you're gonna hit. Well, I ain't gonna get that and leave a bunch of money for her to celebrate with some other dude, and then you hear the same thing her. Well, I ain't getting this so I can die. He's celebrating all that money. I leave with some other woman. So that's not what we're talking about here.
That's not what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. So. No, that's not what we're talking about. That's a good one. No, but all in all, it goes back to living in a way where you want to leave a legacy, obviously, but you also want to leave in a way where you're remembered for the good and for how you've impacted other people.
Right.
And so the people that I've encouraged and that have lost loved ones, I said, listen, it's okay to mourn, it's okay to grieve, it's okay to keep that loved one in your heart. I said, but the most important thing is to celebrate who they were and how they've impacted you so you can then use that same spirit in which you've experienced with them and you can share that with others. Because when you see the pictures and you see the videos, that should be a time of sadness, should be a time of happiness because you once had that person in your life and you were impacted by it. I said, and that's how death should be. Death should be a celebration. It shouldn't be oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like I'm not going to, yes, you're going to have the physical carnal emotions that are going to be attached with the initial shock. I said, but once you are able to put that thing in perspective, you have to remember this was part of the plan, whether you liked it or not. You just didn't know when it was going to happen. No one knows when it's going to happen. So when you look at death, and I tell people this all the time, if you can celebrate birth, you can celebrate your life, then you can also celebrate death in the sense of knowing and understanding you can't have one without the three. You can't just, it's got to be all three or none at all. And in this life is all three. But death should be taken into consideration as we live each day because our goal, I believe, is how we die, how we want to be remembered by our loved ones and our family and friends. If I love them as much as I say I do, if I care about them as much as I say I do, then I want to make sure that when I leave, that's what they're going to remember. How I demonstrated that, how I treated people. Yes, I'm not perfect, never will be.
And hopefully it's an example for them because they'll never leave it something.
There you go. It's like pass that thing over. And I always tell my kids, I said, listen, my job is to teach you guys how to be a better man than I. I said, I'm going to leave this earth one day, but I want you guys to continue to carry the legacy in which I've established because I want you to know and understand that you have to be able to set an example and leave it for others to follow, just like I'm leaving an example for you guys. I said, because you and I both, we don't know when we're going to go, but when we do, we want to make sure we leaving right and we're leaving people in a place where they can celebrate and rejoice and remember and have good times and laughter. Because that's what death should be. It should be a celebration of one's life, the impact that they left, and how they were able to impact the people that was in their life from birth up until.
Yeah.
And that's really how I look at it. And like I said, and I'm not afraid. This is the thing. Some people have said this, and I had to think about it. I didn't comment, but they said, I don't want to die. I'm really afraid to die. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, what are you afraid of? Because you won't know it.
Right.
You won't know it. And I say, I'm not afraid because I know that once I'm separated from this body, I'm going to be with the Lord. That's my belief. So the best way for me is to continue to live according to my purpose and being able to leave the best examples that I can with those people that I've come in contact with. Why? Because when I'm gone, not that I will know this or not, but when I'm gone, I want people to remember good things. I want people to be like, I learned this from him. I remember he said this, and I'm still can recall that today. That's how I want to be remembered. But how do I work on that? By learning how to die the right way.
Yeah. I just thought this was a very important topic for us to address because death is a topic that most people dance around, skate around,
Yes.
and never directly address. And I just wanted our audience to understand that is just as much a part of our lives as anything else.
It is. It's very important.
It's an inevitability.
Yes.
As I live and breathe, I will eventually not anymore.
That's it. That's it.
And so, no matter how much I try to ignore that or not address it, it's like the elephant in the room. It doesn't mean it's not going to exist. It's still there.
Yes.
So make peace with it.
Make peace with
That's
it.
the biggest thing. Make peace with it. You've already made peace with the fact that you're alive and living.
Yes.
So make the most of your liveliness so that when death comes, it's not such a horrendous or surprising situation because it will come at some point.
Yeah.
Through your living should be a good preparation for your dying.
There you go. Preparing. That's
know,
it. Yes.
As I say, I would not be a good parent or good spouse if I lived my life in a way that I left burden for other people to take care of when I'm gone.
Man.
So I'm living my life in a way so that they can, at some point, mourn and celebrate the loss of me not being there, but not having to deal with a burden or burdensome situation that I left behind because I didn't do things in an appropriate fashion.
There you go. That's it. Hey man, you couldn't have said it better. And I thank you for this topic because I think we really help some people who continue to struggle with death. And like I said, we don't want the audience to think that we're being insensitive
Right.
to losing someone because we all have lost someone or another, and we've all been impacted. But I think that the more deaths that we experience should be able to help us to deal with it in a way where we understand it's a part of life. Just like we have newborns being brought in, we're having people leaving this earth, and that's just a part of life. So I really believe it's part of just having the right perspective that's going to be healthy enough for us to continue living the right way as it relates to making sure that we live right so we can leave right.
Exactly.
And that's how I'm just going to end it. Life after the fight.
Thanks, audience, for listening. I hope we didn't bring you down with that, but I just thought that that was something that needed to be addressed.
Yes.
And I gotta tell you, I'm led by my spiritual side as more than my physical. My physical is enjoying this experience, but something in my spirit told me that somebody out there needed to understand that when we engage in life and living, death is inevitable and an inevitability that will show up at some point. And even if it's not you, it will be someone close to you. And just know how to understand and not deal with, but respect the process.
There you go. All right. Well,
all right.
That was good, man.
All right, man.
All right. Till next time.
Till next time.
All right. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.